MP Tim Wilson joining me via Skype. Tim Wilson, thanks very much for your time today. We might start on jobs. Treasury out there saying it could have been a lot worse. We've got an unemployment rate still we're heading to of 10% we're getting warned about. Is that a relative success?
Well, I don't know that you can measure things in those sorts of terms. What we have to focus on is making sure that we can keep as many people in their jobs and making sure that people can return to work as quickly as possible. And that's been the foundation of the government's approach, particularly around the job keeper scheme of as many people as we can possibly keep in their employment, existing employment arrangements in a situation where they can either continue to do work, but critically that when we get to the end of this health crisis or stages of this crisis, that we can get people back into employment and back to as much of life as normal as quickly as possible.
Stages is a key one there. We've got a meeting on Thursday coming up where National Cabinet's going to be told about various options to try to ease some restrictions. The government spoke a lot about being forward-leaning in the health response. Is it possible at the same time to be forward-leaning about getting the economy going again?
Well, that's why the hibernation strategy of the government has been focused on making sure we don't shut too much of it down, because in the end, the economy is like a big machine. If it grinds along and it's going well, obviously, it moves at a fast pace. But then when you stop or you slow it down, it can sometimes take more effort to get it going again. And so that's why the hibernation strategy has been so critical, because it's meant that not everything has fully stopped. Do we need to make sure that we're providing stages where the economy can pick up? Of course, but that should be informed both on the health evidence, because if we don't use health as a base for some of these decisions, then we could end up in a second wave or a recycle where we have to go backwards. So it's incremental steps so that we can reopen the economy against the medical advice to take the country forward as quickly as possible.
It's kind of difficult though, isn't it? I mean, it's a devilish problem to have, because you mentioned the medical advice and that's true, but as soon as you do ease restrictions, there will likely be some deaths. It's not like you can, say, well, we can't open the economy up at all if a single person dies. How do you weigh that up? How do you feed the numbers in?
Well, there's no way you can avoid all risk in society and associated with health. We know there are health costs associated with other activities within the economy every day. And so it's about making informed and principled decisions that are properly engage with the medical community to understand the risk profile, but you can't remove risk from COVID-19 or any other type of medical issue, and so it's just a step-by-step approach, and that's why caution is sensible, but also making sure that we recognise the full health consequences as well of what happens when you hibernate the economy. There are other people who have debt, they're obviously, and that can become crippling for them. There's obviously people who need employment to survive, and so it's about making sure we weigh the full consequences, not just in isolation.
So do we need to, as a nation, be able to decide whether the government's doing the right thing or not by getting a bit more information when it's available and they have the options? Here's what it'll do to economic growth. Here's how many people would be unemployed if we didn't ease restrictions, and here's how many people, unfortunately, might die with some easing of restrictions?
Well, firstly, the government's actually been very transparent about the decisions made and the basis in which it's made those decisions so far. You can model some of these things, but the practical reality is you're never going to have precise measurements about them. So that's why doing it in a staged and measured way.
No, but we could have some parameters along those markers, couldn't we?
Well, it's about drawing baselines, and as decisions are made, that they're informed by the evidence to make baseline decisions, so that if another step is taken, it's done firstly with full consultation, awareness of the broad impacts, and making sure that we're able to balance the tension between health, employment and jobs, so that all Australians can be as healthy as possible, and we can get our economy back on track to employ people and confront the economic challenges that have flowed as a consequence of COVID-19.
Okay, a couple more issues. Wet markets could be reopened in China. The World Health Organization has confidence that the Chinese Communist Party will be able to have sufficient checks and balances to make sure another virus risk is not emerging. Do we believe them?
Who, the WHO or the Chinese Communist Party? I have very little faith in the Chinese Communist Party, and my confidence in the World Health Organization has been shattered as well. People forget after the SARS crisis that the World Health Organization, the international health regulations, went through significant review and reform to make sure that suppression of evidence or data of viruses coming out couldn't be suppressed again. And frankly, now it seems like that's exactly what's happened. And the World Health Organization has been delinquent in its duties. So I don't have much confidence, frankly. I think the WHO has got to take a very good hard look at itself, its conduct, and its contribution to this pandemic.
What happens though? What are the actual ramifications? Let's focus on who. Do we need to clear out personnel in there? Does there need to be an overhaul of how the whole thing's working? Does a funding threat need to be made from Australia?
Well, I think at this point we're all focused on our domestic concerns around the health impacts of COVID-19 and the economic consequences that have flowed through to Australians. But I've no doubt there'll be a proper assessment and review. I know in the United States, many senators are already talking about accountability measures for the WHO. And I think one of the big challenges with any UN institution is making sure there are proper accountability measures so that they're held accountable to their task. They're doing it in the interests of the public, but ultimately it needs to be done with the cooperation of nation states. And I'm sure that conversation will happen in time.
Just finally, Virgin Australia, is the view from you and the government more broadly, it would be better to have them stay in the market rather than just bring in a new carrier? A lot of people would lose flight money, frequent flyers and so on.
Well, I mean, the government's obviously considering all of these issues at the moment, but of course it's always better to have more players in the market. It's always better to have competition. No one's arguing against that. It's how you assess the cost and what financial support they need to stay in, and then what the trade-offs are. I mean, there's lots of discussions in the Financial Review and other newspapers about different equity measures that could be taken as a trade-off for money being put into a company like Virgin. My position has always been that we have to do it very cautiously. I'm not a big fan of taxpayers underwriting businesses, and it would have to do with some sort of equity stake, in my opinion, because in the end, taxpayers need value for their buck.
All right, an equity stake, which is what Labor's calling for. Interesting position. Tim Wilson, appreciate your time as ever. Thank you.
Thank you.